Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm going to be doing a quick video on household debt. This is an area that you constantly see buzzwords by the NDP and the Liberal Party kind of blaming Stephen Harper on increases in household debt, the ratio, and how people are in distress, and it's kind of trying to feed into terms of the messaging the Liberal Party and the NDP are trying to say that Harper's been harmful to the middle class. So I'm going to basically cover some key aspects of household debt to keep it into basic conversation. The key aspect with household debt, basically, it's been on the rise, which is understood because with low interest rates and everything else going on with a strong economy, you've got supply and demand when it comes to real estate. So we've seen ridiculous at times bids and ask prices for real estate have kind of driven up the housing prices and that therefore driven up the mortgages. So that's something to bear in mind too as well. Now if we talk about interest rates, and this is something that you need to be cognizant of, Stephen Harper has no control over interest rates. The interest rates set in this country are set by the Bank of Canada, which is completely independent of any ruling government. So if Thomas Mulcair says he has control over interest rates, he does not, because the Bank of Canada sets those interest rates. He cannot influence them or have any kind of impact on them. He can by basically monetary policies in terms of spending money or different things that may cause some issues with inflation, which the Bank of Canada may step in. So what is household debt? That's the whole value of your debt. That's from student loans to mortgages to car loans to any type of loan. So anything that you owe to a third party, a bank, a finance company, that's deemed household debt. And the way we look at things is how much is your income is and how much do you owe based on that. Well, the bulk of any household debt is going to be mortgages, because typically until you pay that mortgage down, the principal down, and build up that equity, you basically are going to show the ratio quite high. Now what's basically going to happen over the next few slides, I'm going to introduce you to some myths around household debt. So let's talk about household spending. This is based on Stats Canada report that on an average household spending in Canada, we're seeing about $80,000 spent. The bulk of that spending is in three areas. That's taxation and also into accommodation. And accommodation can be rent, it can be mortgages, and it can be all that. So the bulk of your income's tied into those areas. Now, that being said, one thing you need to bear in mind in terms of policy statement, the two governments are talking about bringing in a cap and trade system are Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau. So when you see expenses like personal care, when you see expenses like tobacco, you see expenses like food and stuff, basically, and even utility costs, anything that deals with carbon will be impacted in terms of prices. So your household budget actually will go up once a cap and trade system is fully implemented. That's never discussed by Thomas Mulcair or Justin Trudeau, because they don't really want to tell you that they're going to hit you in the back end of this. They seem to think that they can kind of have this hidden agenda in cap and trade, that it won't impact household budget. That's a myth, and that's something I want to clarify here. If you want a good example, go to the UK and look at where they've implemented a cap and trade process or a system, and especially in the UK where they've seen electrical bills go up by 8 to 12% based on cap and trade. Let's talk about myths. Okay, now Canada is always compared to the US. Now the US real estate market basically had serious issues, and that was part of the reasons we had the 2008 to 2009 recession. That being said, what you need to bear in mind here too as well is Canada is not as indebted as much as the US, and this is what this ratio shows. They're also showing here too as well, debt is not rising faster than GDP anymore. We've seen it started to slow that growth in household debt, so there's been a little bit more control in that area, which is another thing. It's not growing at a exasperating pace. This is also telling you about the myths about poor credit rating. Canadians are usually in pretty good credit standing. We don't have the situations where we've got people in default positions or potential to be there if interest rates rise. There's probably maybe about 12% of the people that might be impacted by pricing in terms of mortgage interest that might have struggles. But that's not as compared to the U.S. The U.S. were in a lot more distress because they had such a fall of their market pricing in the equity, and that also led to their deterioration into their middle class. Let's talk about household finances. Now, you're going to hear different opinion here. Household budgets in general are not under pressure. Most people are living within their means. Most people are able to save. And if you don't trust me, you can go look at the CDAL's report, which basically discusses how people are saving for retirement and are actually even taking advantage of tax-free savings accounts. So there are people saving. You're just hearing things like this for spin by Trudeau and Mulcair because they think they can pander for votes by saying they're going to be better at handling policies that will drive household debt. Now, let's talk about economic policies. We've got three groups listed here. We got the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal government. The federal government sets the mortgage amortization period. They've made some adjustments over the years to bring that amortization down, which also helps influence basically trying to curb mortgage debt, but also trying to put some controls into that to ensure that we don't overexceed stuff. Bank fees. Where this is getting into is the NDP, and this is one policy and a few I've ever supported them on, is looking at bank-to-bank fees. So if you make online bill payments like mortgages and all that, you're not being charged a transaction fee. That's something they're looking at. Student loans, both the federal and provincial governments get involved with student loans. So we're seeing the cost of education go up. In the case of Ontario has some of the highest tuition rates, so we're seeing that go up as well, and that's driving some of the household debt. Let's talk about the provincial government now. The provincial government, each one regulates the real estate industry, so the real estate boards get involved. Recently in Ontario's case, they were looking at the bids and ask prices to try to make sure that people weren't playing games with silent bids to just up the prices, so they were trying to put some controls around that. Now, there's more that can be done, but a lot of that has to do with the next slide. We'll talk about real estate prices in terms of some fixes that can be done, but are not necessary directly at the government. Land transfer fees, this is what the government sets as terms of revenue and taxation as part of when you sell a property. Hydro rates, this impacts because in Ontario's case we've seen hydro rates go up 30-40%. That impacts household budgets as well. At the municipal level, this is where we're talking property taxes. So they have to pay for arbitration, they have to pay for roads and all that. So they'll be looking at ways to hike up property taxes, which also impacts you. So these are the particular areas. Now, why I broke it out this way, it's very clear that when you hear Mulcair and Trudeau talk, they're not talking about specifically what they can do. They're just talking at a holistic view of household debt. Let's talk about issues. If you're going to fix household debt, it starts early on with the school system. The school system should be educating people how to run household budgets. That means, how do I live with my means? Here's my cash coming in, here's my expenses, and how do I achieve my financial goals? That's part of the problem that you're seeing right now with household debts. People are overextending themselves because they're not doing proper financial management. The other problem is the mortgage approval process. The banks themselves are basing it on a particular calculation like gross income, and it should be based on net income. There should be some adjustments that come into play when you actually qualify people for mortgages based on income, probably at net income, that you're going to have a disposable income. We also should be basically looking at growth and pricing, tying it to GDP or wage growth, so that we're not getting to see prices of houses going at 6 to 7% in growth, where the economy is growing at 2% or wage increases are growing at 1%. There should be a correlation between that as part of management. We also should be looking at other aspects of maintenance and other costs, that you should be able to have a laid down cost, that you should be able to carry the mortgage and the maintenance cost as part of running it. The last bullet point here is more oversight in foreign property. This is a big issue in big metropolitan areas like Vancouver, Toronto, where you're getting foreign money come in, buying up real estate. There needs to be more and more control to kind of monitor foreign holdings. Now, these are kind of some of the points that you'll hear back and forth, but the real aspect I want to drive home here is the government, the federal government, can only do certain amount of policies that will drive housing. They cannot do a lot of policies because they don't have control over the price of wood. They don't have the control over labor rates by a construction company. They don't have the control over the land sales. That's basically when you get in the municipal level, they control that. or provincial, if it's provincial land, they may sell. But the federal governments and them have limited what they can do to control household debt. And that's something that you need to ask this question is when you listen to Mulcair and Trudeau speak, is what policies are you going to bring in that's going to reduce household debt? And that's the questions you should be asking.